Hi guys, welcome back to NASA's Thread. Today we'll be learning how to make a backless halter neck top. Alright, so this is the fabric we'll be working with for this project. I've gone ahead to fold my paper, my pattern paper into two, and I'm just marking a line at the top which will serve as my shoulder line and my starting line. So you can also go ahead and make the markings on your fabric directly if you don't have a pattern paper. Okay, so I'm going ahead to mark my bust point, which is 10 inches, and I'm just going to roll a line across to make the small bold. And from that point where I marked my bust point, I'll be going up by 2 inches to get my chest line. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to roll a line across from it. All right. Then I'll go ahead and measure the length of this. Okay, for mine, I want it to be 17 inches. All right, so I went ahead to mark 17 inches down. I'll just go ahead and roll a line across this. So the next thing I want to do is just label this, the bust point, the chest line, and the full length of this. All right, so I'll measure out my neck width. I'm using a neck width of 3 inches. I'll go ahead and measure this out, and the neck depth of 3.5 inches. I will go ahead and mark this down and use my curved rule to make my connection at this end here. And after doing that, I'll go ahead and measure my round bust divided by 4 and just mark it down at this point. Then the next thing I want to do is to connect this end to this other part with my straight rule. Okay, so I'm connecting my neck width to the point where I have my round bust division. Okay, so this top is going to have a dart. It's going to have a normal dart. All right, so I'm going to measure my bust span, which is the distance from one nipple to the other. For mine, it is 7 inches. I divided that by 2. I have 3.5. So I went ahead to mark this at the bust point and at the waist point. That's the full length point. Okay, sorry about this part of the video. It actually went off, so I'm just going to explain what happened around this area. All right, so I just after measuring out taking my measurement for my bust span, I joined the line together, and then I went down from the bust point by 1 inch, and then I went in and out on both points of the waist by 1/2 inch, and I connected it to that point. All right, so after doing that, I'm just adding my allowances to the side. This is going to serve as the back part of this, so I will advise at this point to add more for yours instead of less. Okay, so ensure you add more for yours. All right, so I just added 2 inches at the chest line area. Now at the waist, I divided my round waist by 4, marked it down, added my dart allowance, and I'm adding 2 inches of an allowance. Okay, like I said, I would advise you use more allowance. Okay, so at least 2.5, okay, to 3 inches, so you have more covering. That's if you want more covering at the back. Okay, so you need more that allowance for the back covering. So I just went ahead to connect this together. All right, and I'll go ahead and cut it out. All right, so we'll finish cutting this out. This is what it looks like when we open this up. So I'll go ahead and cut this out on my fabric. All right, so I'm using my fabric, the same fabric for my lining piece. So I went ahead to cut 2 pieces of this, and I added half of an inch allowance around this apart from the neckline area. So what I'm doing just now is trying to transfer my dart to the main piece of the fabric. So if you did your measurements on your fabric, you don't need to do this, but if you did not, if you use the pattern paper, you need to transfer your dart to the fabric. So I'm just simply following the same pattern, taking half of my bust span, that's my nipple to nipple measurement. I measure the length of the dart, okay, where it's going to sit. For 6 inches, did the measurement of 1/2 inch on both sides. Okay, went in and out by half of an inch on both sides. All right, and I will connect this to the top part of this. Okay, I was saying I'm using the same piece of fabric for the lining. Okay, you need a lining piece. So if you're using an Ankara for this, you need a lining. You can get a lining, or you can use your same fabric for your lining piece, or use a different fabric so that you can have this to be a reversible crop top for you. All right, So if you want yours to be two ways, you can just use different piece of fabric and it will come out lovely, I promise you. Okay, so I've gone ahead to connect this is what it looks like. What I'll do is to repeat the same thing on the other end of this. I'll repeat the same process here, and after doing that, I'll also do the same thing for the piece I'm using for my lining. So go ahead and do the same thing. Now ensure you're using the same length of that. You don't want one to be longer than the other. All right, and ensure you're taking exactly the same measurement. You don't want to consume more than the allowance you added for your that allowance. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Ensure you just use 1 inch, that's half of an inch on both sides. All right, so I've done that. This is what it looks like. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stitch down my dart. All right, and I'll do the same thing for my lining piece. Go ahead and place my dart there and do the same thing for it. Bring it back and show you what I have. All right, so I've gone ahead to do that. This is what we have. After I finish darting it, you can see I've darted both pieces of this. All right, so want to start stitching on this. Okay, remember this a crop top is not going to have any back at all. The back will be laced up. So what we want to do is to make our loops that we're going to use, our loop and our strap for this. Okay, so I went ahead to cut out 2 pieces of straps for both ends of this. It measures 1.5 inch in width. Okay, the length can be as long as possible. Ensure it is long enough to go through the loops. Okay, and you have extra left. And I went ahead to cut out a piece of 1 inch I'll be using to make my loops. All right, this measures 1 inch. And ensure the length is enough to get you the number of loops you desire to have on your top. So I'll go ahead and fold this up this way. All right, this is what I'm going to do. Stitch it down and then do the same thing to this. So I've gone ahead to stitch them down. You can see this is my straps and this is the one that will serve as my loop. Okay, so for me to cut out my loop, I'll just take the measurements around here, so I'll know how many loops I need on both sides of this. That's going to serve me well. I went ahead to take my measurement. Okay, so I wanted to place this at a distance of 2.5 inches from each other, so I just used the 2.5 inches allowance to measure this out, so I will know how many I need on each side of this. And after doing that, I have about 5 points where I need to place this. That means I'll be needing about 10 of this. All right, so I'm just going to make the same marking on the other end. Okay, so you want to make the marks on the right side of your fabric. All right, you want to make it on the right side because the stitching will happen on the right side of the fabric. So you want to, the placing of the loop, sorry, will happen on the right side of the fabric. So I went ahead to measure this down. I had 10. I will be needing 10 loops for this. So yours can be more or shorter depending on how many loops you want. Okay, then the loops will be measuring about 2 inches because after measuring the strap I have here, it was 20 inches. So I decided to go by 2 inches for them so that they'll have length of 2 inches, and I went ahead to cut out the different piece I'll be needing to make my loop. So I finished cutting this out. You can see I have this here 5 for each side and 5 for the other side. Okay, so before I start stitching down the loops, I'm going to stitch down my straps first. So I'll be placing this at this point. This is where it's going to sit, and I'll bring in the other piece and place it at this other point first. Okay, and bring in my lining piece after placing it correctly. Ensure it is placed at the right point. Okay, I'm bringing my lining piece. Now I'm placing my fabric front facing front. Okay, you don't want to make this mistake, so that you have every stitch down area inside. Okay, so you can see this is what we have. It is front facing front. You can see the back part of this facing up. All right, so you want to pin this down so that it is not moving about. I entail you to please pin this down. Okay, you don't want your fabric to be moving about while you're trying to stitch this down on the sewing machine. So I went ahead and pin mine down so that it gives it a firm holding, and I'll do the same thing to the other part of this. Like I said, pin it down. it works better when it is pinned down. So I'll just go ahead and pin it down so that they are placed nicely and correctly. Ensure you place them correctly, okay? So after pinning down, I'll go over to the machine and then I'll stitch from the armhole area, okay? I'm just going to make my stitch from this end, right? This end here, and then stitch it to this part, to the neckline, and then to the other end, all right? That's just where I'm going to stitch for now. So I'll just go ahead and stitch it down right now. So I've done that. This is what we have at the end of the day. It looks this way, okay? So we're not turning this over yet because we've not pinned down our loops, we've not stitched down our loops, okay? So I'll be placing these loops exactly where I made my marks, okay? So I'm just going to place them down at that point. Use the lining piece, that's the top part, and then cover it up and then pin it down. So it's just basically pinning it at the points you marked. If you decide to use 1 inch of distance, 1 inch distance from each other, just go ahead and pin it down in that same direction. Ensure you're pinning down correctly and ensure they're placed around the same area on both sides, okay? So that you don't have one down, one up. It's going to get a little confusing while you're trying to lace this up. Right, so I'm just going to pin this down so that I can show you what I mean. So you will notice I'm pinning the main part of the loop, the part that will be outside, I'm pinning it inside, okay? So ensure you're pinning this the right way. You don't want to lose this up after stitching it down, okay? You can see how I'm pinning mine, okay? I placed the inside, like the part of the hole inside, and then pinned it down. All right, this is the right way it's going to look. So I'll go ahead and stitch it down. You want to ensure you're not stitching on your loops, okay? So just give a little distance from the edge and then stitch it down, stitch it on both sides. Then on the end, I'm going to the bottom part, I will stitch it down, but I'm going to leave a little space where I can use to turn this over to the right side. All right, so I'll go ahead and do that now. I've done that. This is what it looks like, okay? I also went ahead to give this a really good press. You can see how this turned out. It looks quite nice. Like I said, it can be a reversible top if you have different fabrics to match this, okay? You can use a very beautiful top. Like I used a crepe fabric for this, so if you have different colors of crepe, you can decide to just use them, okay? So I'm just going to loop this up to show us what it looks like. I'm just doing lace this up. It's just the simple way we lace our shoes. That's just the format I'm using, okay? So if you have a different pattern of lacing, you can go ahead and use that for yours. For me, I'm just going to use the shoe lacing style. So I actually attached a safety pin to my rope so that I can pass this through freely, because I actually noticed it works better this way. Instead of struggling to pass it through the holes, I just went ahead to attach my safety pin to the edge of it, and I'm using this to work, okay? So you want to ensure your ropes are straightened while you're putting this down. Just take your time. It's not going to take much time, but just relax and do this so it's come out looking nice, okay? So I've finished doing that. This is what it looks like, okay? This is what we have. Like I said, you can wear this reversible if you're using a different fabric for it. It's going to look very pretty if you're doing that. Okay. And don't forget to stitch down the opening part. Okay. The place you left to turn this over. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Okay. And if you've not subscribed, please subscribe and tell me if you're going to be making this in the comment section. All right. And don't forget to turn on your notification bell to be notified whenever I post a new video. So this is what the top looks like after I wore it. It looks quite nice. It looks very good. I assure you this is going to look very pretty on you if you decide to make this. So our top came out quite nicely. It looks good. All right. So don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for watching and see you in the next tutorial. Bye.